everyone. My name is Anne-Marie Kelley. I am a U.S. Policy Advisor to GBBC. I have with me today to talk about the interaction between the private sector and the regulatory agencies and governments. Richard Gabbert, who is head of the SEC's Crypto Task Force. Skyler, Pinna with the New York Financial Services Department, and Takaya Sugino with Japan's Financial Services Department. Thank you guys all for being here. This is a really busy time on the regulatory front. Everyone is interested in this and also interested in how they can interact and make sure that we have proper innovation that both helps shape where the industry and this new technology is all going. One of the first things I want to ask you guys are what ways currently exist for the private sector to engage with the regulatory agencies. And tell me how that's going for your particular agencies. Richard, if you want to start.
Sure, thank you, Anne-Marie. I have to give my disclaimer first. My remarks here are my own views and not necessarily the views of the Commission, the commissioners, or my colleagues at the Commission. The SEC historically has had a pretty robust engagement process with the public. The past 4 years were, I think, a significant departure from that. And on the Crypto Task Force, we've tried to reopen the doors to engagement with members of the public and folks in industry. And we've done that in several different ways. First, Commissioner Peirce, who's the chairman of the Crypto Task Force, issued a request for information in February with 48 questions, I think. So we've since received in response to that, I think, well over 2,000 pages of written submissions. We've also hosted roundtables that have seen strong participation both in person and online, and we've met with probably over 120 parties so far, either in person or virtually. And so we've, I think, successfully developed a robust dialogue over the past 5 months.
Great. Skyler?
Hello, everyone. I'd say from the New York side, there's really 2 different ways that the industry can engage with us. The first is you can come in and get licensed by us, and then I can promise you there will be a lot of ongoing, continuous engagement, and a lot of times I find that engagement to be incredibly helpful, particularly on the ongoing monitoring side, because the industry really is one of our greatest source of information, particularly when it comes to being alerted to emerging trends and how risk might evolve in response to that. Separate from the licensing process and being subject to our direct supervision, we do have something in New York called the DFS exchange, and that provides a platform where anyone from the industry or anyone outside of our regulated world can come in and engage with us in an informal, still confidential setting. But that's where we really meet with a lot of very interesting companies in the space, a lot of foundation groups, a lot of academics, a lot of consortiums. And that gives us the opportunity to really hear from the industry. What are they working on? What's the benefits to the state? What risks do they see? And what challenges do they see in growing and having a sustainable business? And that gives us an incredible wealth of information that we do incorporate to our overall supervisory strategy. So if anyone out there does have a company or does want to come meet with us, I definitely encourage you to check out the DFS exchange online, or just find me after, or just look at my name and shoot me an email, and I'd be glad to help set up that dialogue.
And Takaya, how can the private sector interact with Japan's financial services?
Yeah, there are a lot of mechanisms for public and private engagement in our jurisdiction right now. And I think there are different purposes for private and public engagement. For example, purposes include like regulatory clarification, like mutual education, and like responses to emergency situation, and like a lot of like purposes. And for the purpose of like regulatory clarification, JFSA, the Japanese Financial Services Agency, like has a lot of like mechanisms, including like fintech support desk, which like where like JFSA receives a lot of inquiries from business operators, including like blockchain and crypto-related business operators, and JFSA answers questions regarding the interpretation of financial law for their new businesses based on the current regulatory framework we have. And also we have like fintech, like proof of concept hub, where JFSA provides ongoing support to like experimental projects led by like financial institutions and like also like blockchain related companies and like fintech companies. And they tend to have like hesitations and concerns regarding like regulatory compliance when it comes to like like starting a new business, right? So these types of mechanisms help them like alleviate concerns and like hesitations when they wanted to start a new business. And also like for mutual education, we have the Japan FinTech Week, which happens every year, and the last one happened last March, and the next one is going to be happening like next February and March. And we have a lot of like opportunities for regulators and business operators, private sector to have a casual conversation, formal discussion with each other. And we also have like blockchain roundtables where we discuss like emerging issues in the industry. And also like I'm also helping a nonprofit organization called Blockchain Governance Initiative Network that aims to create standards and best practices for like blockchain governance through multi-stakeholder discussion. And we have a lot of opportunities where different stakeholders give different perspectives to emerging issues and challenges, and based on that we create try to create standards, best practices, and like some sort of guidelines out of this discussion. So yeah, there are certainly a lot of like opportunities that can be taken advantage of for public and private sector in our jurisdiction and internationally, of course.
That's amazing. Since I've left the SEC, I've been working as a consultant to help companies navigate Congress and the different regulatory agencies to interact and kind of help them learn what they're doing. One of the things that clients have asked me is, do the regulators actually care what they say? And are they listening to them? And from you guys, what kind of importance do you guys put into what the private sector says? And how is that helping to shape your rules and get some, responsible innovation rules? I will start with Skyler.
I was hoping Richard would go first, but I think the private sector engagement is incredibly important at, I wouldn't say necessarily influencing what we do, but certainly informing what we do, both in terms of the need to issue new guidance or potentially provide interpretations of our current guidance to make sure that the intent is well understood and appreciated. Because I think what we really want is a fairly an iterative process in which we can set out what should be fair base level expectations that everybody must follow, really to have sustainable long-term innovation that really puts consumer protection as a first order principle. And I think that's not possible to do without working with the private sector to understand what the businesses actually are, hear from them and have that dialogue on what do we see the risks, what do they see as the risks, what do we see as the appropriate controls, what do they see as the appropriate controls, and ideally there should always be a middle ground that we can follow. And the only way I view that we can find that middle ground is by having that open and frank conversations that really lay clear what our first order principles are, what we identify as the concerns, and then learning where we might not have it 100% right, because I don't think anybody has it 100% right at this stage in the game.
Takaya?
Yeah, so one of the discussions we had at our nonprofit was about, for example, like, regulatory uncertainty for Lightning Network businesses. And, there was a discussion among regulators, business operators, lawyers, and also like, Bitcoin/Lightning Network core developers as well. And, regulators gave like legal regulatory perspectives and like stated concerns regarding like their risks, while like, core developers gave technical perspectives and put an emphasis on the importance of like, privacy protection. And these types of like multi-stakeholder, discussion ended up like, we decided to create, we ended up creating a short paper that summarizes considerations, points based on the discussion. And I think it's a good example of like, how important like multi-stakeholder discussion is for this industry because of the nature of this industry. And like, because, an interesting nature of this industry is that, different stakeholders have like different philosophies, different ethos, right? It's also a challenging part of this industry, right? But because of that, like, it's important to make sure that everyone is heard, and it shouldn't be just a communication between like large players and just regulators, So we definitely need to be inclusive to like small business players and also like technologists, developers. So that's what I believe in, and it's important. So that's why our nonprofit is focusing on that kind of like activities. So.
Perfect. Richard, you're up.
Yeah, so I've been involved in rule writing at the Commission for basically my entire time there, so almost 14 years. And I've been impressed with the Commission's approach to attempting to address every comment in its rulemaking process. It's something that I take to heart when I work on rules, and something that arguably is required under the Administrative Procedures Act. When we get to more informal guidance, a lot of that is done in response to inquiries from folks in the market who are trying to figure out how to comply with our rules, or whether our rules even apply to the conduct that they're engaged in. I think in this area, dealing with blockchain and crypto assets, that kind of engagement is even more important. We are used to dealing with players in the traditional finance space. Not many of us have experience with this new technology. In fact, under government ethics rules, we can't even touch this technology. So many of us have never had the opportunity to have our own wallet, for example. And so having folks come in, walk us through how the technology works, occasionally doing demonstrations for us, is very helpful for us as we think through where it makes sense to apply our existing rules, where new rules are necessary, or where maybe exemptive relief might be appropriate.
Richard, I'm keeping it on you because the SEC is near and dear to my heart and what I know, but I went to a lot of the SEC crypto roundtables. That was very successful. You guys just finished it up.
Yes.
What can we expect to see next? Are you guys going to keep the engagement going on? And when can we see something come out of those roundtables?
So yes, we are continuing to engage with the public. We did have the 5 roundtables that covered 5 particularly challenging issues, at least as we saw them at the beginning of the task force when we put these together. We are, synthesizing our learnings from those roundtables, but we continue to meet with folks from the public and accept written input. If you go to the SEC's website, there on the homepage is a link to the crypto task forces part of the SEC's website, and you can find there pages for written submission and also pages to request a meeting. So if you do have issues that you would like to bring to our attention or help us think through, we welcome that engagement. Going forward, there's still a lot of work to be done. The various divisions at the agency have put out several staff level statements, but the chairman has indicated his desire to move to more commission level action. This will allow us, hopefully, to provide additional clarity, maybe even a rule set that folks will be able to have confidence in terms of complying with the various acts that we administer, and also give it some staying power. So I would expect, to see that in the coming months. I will note that the process for commission level action takes more time than staff level action. So this is, potentially a matter of months, not necessarily weeks. So.
Thank you. Takaya, Japan has had a sandbox, a regulatory sandbox since 2018. What lessons have you guys learned? Has that been successful for you? And do you recommend other government agencies also look into using that?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, we have like FinTech Proof of Concept Hub, and we started supporting another project this month, which is related to blockchain. And yeah, we definitely believe that that kind of sandbox and mechanisms helps us business operators start new challenges, new businesses without concerns about regulatory compliance too much. And there are several sandbox projects going on, but it's not necessarily just about blockchain and crypto, but that kind of the existence of that kind of mechanisms always helps business operators, I believe. And I don't know if the US is gonna do that kind of stuff, but yeah.
You would recommend it?
Yeah, I think it's definitely helpful for business operators, we believe, so. Yeah.
Great. Well, Skyler, New York has been a pioneer in some of the fintech technology, the crypto license, bit license. You guys have been doing this for a while. What would you recommend to the industry to help them navigate with the New York Financial Services Department? And what would you like to see best practices from the industry to help you guys?
That's a really great question. And the first thing that really jumps to mind that I personally would like to see is a little bit better self-policing by the industry itself, and a little bit more willingness to call out the bad actors and not engage in a race to the bottom to chase that more immediate dollar. And I think things like self-regulatory organizations make a lot of sense. I'm not quite sure why there hasn't been that type of growth or development, at least at scale, to date. I do think there are green offshoots along those lines. And that just becomes a little easier for us to engage with something like a self-regulatory organization that can represent a lot of the industry, as opposed to a lot of one-offs, in which case we're a little bit more constrained, especially in a public setting, about the advice that we can give and the information that we're allowed to share. So that's certainly something I would strongly encourage the industry to explore. And then along the same lines, I think the industry can do a much better space, and this would help us out a lot at the department in setting on some standards, especially just when it comes to basic taxonomies. Just, for example, tokenization is all the rage these days. It's something that we're wrapping our heads around internally. We have had a lot of conversations with industry to better understand what they view this new potential business practice, what they view as the risks. And I've had tokenization and tokenized real-world assets described to me in different ways by almost everybody that we've had these conversations with. People say the token is the asset, the token's an instruction, the token's an IOU. That's really hard for me to then summarize what we're hearing and having a concise discussion with my own supervisors at the department, where the industry can't coalesce around terms and what the actual thing is today versus what it might be tomorrow. Then it becomes very difficult for us to kind of wrap our heads around it and then begin working towards whatever guidance might be needed so we can entertain these new products and services in a way that won't impact safety and soundness or the interests of the consumer.
Well, I see my time's running short, but I want to save time because I would be remiss if I didn't ask you guys. There's so much going on. We're in Washington, D.C. We know Congress has just this week been marking up a market structure bill. So this will put the framework, but there's not one right now. How is both the SEC, are they going to wait for market structure to move before they move forward? And New York, are you guys going to wait, or are you guys moving forward now and going to see what happens?
So we are actively following the legislation on the Hill and are eager to see whether Congress and the President see fit to give us instructions as to how they would like us to proceed in this space. We are continuing to work, and I think there are a lot of things that the Commission can do even absent legislation, and a lot of what the Commission does requires a long runway. So we're continuing to work through the issues and determine, in the absence of legislation, where it might be appropriate to engage in rulemaking or to use the Commission's exemptive authority to provide clarity to market participants. But we are looking forward to see what comes off of Capitol Hill.
Great. Skyler, what's New York doing?
Yeah, I'll just say that we're continuing in our current role as the regulator and supervisor of the institutions that we do oversee and license in New York. We're, of course, always paying attention to everything that's happening on Capitol Hill, stablecoin legislation being point one, and then market structure being probably point two on that one. And when there is a bill, we'll, of course, take that back and review everything and understand what it means for us in New York and how we might need to adjust our practices or issue our own guidance. But at this point, we're just continuing in what we've always been doing and always supervising our firms, always monitoring external developments. And if and when there is formal legislation, we'll of course take that back and reevaluate it within the context of our own authority.
And just to finish things up, I want to ask each one of you guys if you could give advice to everyone here on engaging. What would be the one piece of advice? Takaya, I'll start with you.
Yeah, sometimes it's really hard to discuss in a public place. Everybody comes to a public place as a representative of each organization, but it's important to have a place where regulators and private sectors have conversation honestly without caring too much about their stake, and that sort of discussion would definitely lead to some sort of achievement and outcomes that would be better off for the industry. So yeah, yeah, that is.
Skyler?
I'll just say visit the DFS exchange. I'm a little selfish in saying that because those meetings are among the best parts of my own job, and so check out the DFS exchange and come meet with us.
Richard?
And I think coming in with concrete questions and proposals and specific examples of what you want to do and why it does work or doesn't work under our rules is really helpful to us.
Well, great. Thank you guys all for coming here and giving us your time. We really appreciate it. Thanks.
My pleasure. Thank you.